Therefore, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Those words at the close of John 20 might have provided a fitting end to this gospel. It describes the conviction that we have as we have sung today, as Will has led us so capably, that based on the testimony and the discussion and the experiences and the witness given in this fourth book of the New Testament, we have reached the realization that Jesus is the Messiah, that he came to save us from our sins. As we've sung, we believe that he raised Lazarus, that his own tomb is empty, that he made that poor blind man to see in chapter 9, and that he's the answer for you and for me. So why John 21? Perhaps because it helps us understand, once we've reached this conclusion about Jesus, here's what comes next. The steps we're to take, the endeavors which we're to pursue, the mission, the aim of our lives, we're going to find played out before us here. Many people ask, why did Simon Peter decide to go fishing? Was it that was his trade, his profession, and Jesus' appearances, not continuous, but over a period of 40 days. He had come to them on a Sunday night, and then again the following Sunday night. What will Peter do in the meantime? Well, he does what he knows to do. Someone says he had to pay his bills. Some will find fault with him because they think he's lost his zeal or his passion. But the point in this passage is that it was here and now that Jesus manifested himself. Look at verse 1. The intent is that here is the Son of God, having overcome sin and death, in this ordinary, everyday, typical situation that's been repeated countless times in the life of Simon and the others, who is on the shore about 100 yards away, asking, "Children, have you caught any fish?" No. And so drop your net on the other side, and they do, and 153 large fish in a net that could hardly be hauled in. And then the beloved disciple knew it was the Lord. It repeated the miracle in Luke 5 at the beginning of Jesus' ministry when he was in Simon's boat and had him put out a little from the land because there were so many people standing on the shore. And in Luke 5, 1 through 11, that spectacular catch of fish so that the nets were breaking and they had to call the partners over. And Simon Peter had fallen at Jesus' feet. "Depart from me, I'm a sinful man." "Do not fear," he responded. "From now on you'll be catching men." And now once again, "Peter, what are you going to do?" Well, let's recreate. Let's go back to the start. What did Jesus tell you to do then? And how did he make that point? Well, with nets that were empty, and then suddenly Jesus filled the net, and there was a recognition that came. And then Simon Peter there with the others having breakfast with Jesus, where there was actually fish and bread already cooking on a charcoal fire. And the question posed 3 times, "Do you love me?" And 3 answers, yes. And then 3 commissions, "Feed my sheep." And then a forecast of what's going to happen to Peter, that when he's older, his hands will be stretched out and he'll be taken where he doesn't want to go. And Peter looks at the beloved disciple and says, "What about him?" And Jesus says, "You keep your eyes on me. You're going to glorify God in the way that you will lose your life." These 7 disciples, who are they? Well, here you have Simon himself, impulsive, affectionate, rash, outspoken. You notice as soon as he acknowledges it's the Lord, he puts his garment back on and jumps in the water and swims to the shore. He can't wait to be with Jesus while the others come behind him. You have Thomas, called Didymus, the magnificent skeptic, Doubting Thomas, he's been called. And Nathanael, who questioned Jesus' identity at the beginning in John chapter 1 and then came around. And the sons of Zebedee, that would be James and John, and we believe that John is the human author of this gospel. He is the one, he said, that Jesus loved. And to this mix of men, Jesus made it clear that if they would follow his instructions and obey his will and put the net as he directed them, he would fill that net. This morning, let's think about 3 pairs of ideas of the instructions that the Savior is giving them that he wants us to grasp as well, to help us see, as those who have acknowledged that he's the Christ and we have life in his name, that this is what comes next. First, to seek and to save. Look again at the first 8 verses that Terry read for us a few moments ago. We've mentioned these 7 men and Peter's announcement, and he's a leader and they follow and go with him. It's nighttime, they catch nothing, just like it happened in Luke chapter 5. Now daybreak is coming. Jesus is some distance away. No wonder they wouldn't have identified him from that distance. Children, do you not have any fish, do you? And they answered him, no. One writer said, people don't like to talk about their failures. And this may be the most true fish story ever told. Did you catch anything? No. Empty, fruitless, useless, tired. Been a long night. Cast the net on the right side, and you'll find a catch. They cast. They weren't able to haul it in because of the great number of fish. And then John, we think, puts it all together. This has to be the Christ. He's done this before. It wouldn't have happened otherwise. It is the Lord. And Simon Peter hears it, puts his outer garment on, throws himself into the sea. Don't you love that? He's always the first one out of the boat. The other disciples came, again, about 100 yards, having to drag that net full of fish. Verse 11 tells us there were 153, and yet the net was not torn. The more you and I study the Bible, the more we realize there's an intent behind every word or phrase that's spoken. The net was overloaded. It wasn't torn. No fish was lost. All were kept. Why not just lighten the load by throwing some of them back? They're all important. Keep them in the net. And we think about the Lord's church here and the goal we have to seek and to save and then to secure, to keep everyone active and vibrant and thriving. And the emphasis on Bible study feeds that fire and that zeal and that fervor to serve God. And we put ourselves there in the boat with them, and we hear John say, it's the Lord, and suddenly we're with Peter. And we want to get to him as quickly as we can and hold on to him. And then the fish, we want all the fish to make it safely to the shore. It's been said that we catch live fish and cook them and eat them. Jesus catches dead fish. People dying in sin, who can't redeem ourselves, who need a deliverer. And he makes dead fish alive. And then he sends us out to fish. So often we see in Scripture that what God could do by himself without human aid or agency, he does not do. He puts the boat and the net in our control. Brothers and sisters, this church has a great evangelistic and missionary fervor. We are going out across the world. and we're going out across the street. We have the local mission Keller the first Saturday morning of each month that Spencer helps to coordinate. We have World Bible School. We have people stationed in various places training communicators of the gospel because he's told us to seek and to save. So ask yourself, is that your role? Someone wrote a book that said, "Go ye" means go me. Go ye, go me into all the world. Have you made that your own? And what will you do this week? You say you believe in Jesus. You've studied the signs. You're convinced he's the Christ, the Son of God. You have life in his name. What next? What's next is seek and save. Let's challenge each other to do just that. Starting at verse 9, I see another pair of ideas. After they had taken the boat to shore and brought the net with all the fish, breakfast is served. And Jesus invites them to come and bring the fish which you've just caught. Peter drew the net to land. 153, the net not torn. Come and have breakfast. No one needed to ask, "Who are you?" They all knew. And he took the bread and gave it to them, and the fish likewise. When had he done that before? 5,000 plus women and children. 4,000 plus women and children. So much that they had leftovers that they collected in baskets. Is he shifting now from the one metaphor, seek and save, and is he now talking about he's the bread of life? John chapter 6. That what he provides can satisfy the soul so that one will never be hungry or thirsty again. He is the host of the meal. He has the fire going. He has the food prepared. Come. And I think about the Lord's invitation today and every time we meet and when we share the good news with others, it's Jesus saying, come. Are you empty? Are you barren? Are you not finding food that really fills you? So he fills the net, and now he's going to fill them. And he's offering to fill you and me. And while they're there, John says it's the third time he's manifested. Again, the first Sunday night, then a week later when Thomas was present, and now this is number 3. So they finished breakfast, and he said, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, tend my lambs. And then a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Shepherd my sheep. And then a third time, do you love me? And Peter was grieved. It was number 3. Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, tend my sheep. It's been said that salvation is a love affair. That we can have everything right externally. And we should. We're going to follow the prescriptions that God has given for all aspects of the church and the Christian life. But at the heart of it all is a soul that is in love with Jesus Christ. If you tell me who you love, I'll tell you what you will do, where you will go, how you will spend your time. We talk about Bible study. We talk about involvement. We talk about ministry. Will you, can you, would you? Here's the question. Jesus asked, do you love me? Yes, Lord, I love you. Take care of my sheep. And so now, that's the question for you and me in the what next category. How will God use you now? You believe that Jesus is the Christ? You have life in his name? What's next? Love and lead. You find a sheep that's absent. You find a person that's struggling, whose marriage or family may be in trouble, or they've lost their job, or they've received some bad health news. You look for someone that may be drifting, that may be young like a ewe lamb, or old and settled and maybe becoming more stale and routine in their faith. And you do something. Jesus said there was a shepherd that had 100 sheep. 99 were doing great, safe in the fold. One was gone. And what did he do? Where was his attention directed? And he went out and he looked and he searched. He scoured the hills. How long? Until he found that sheep. What's next? Love and lead. Oh, our 7 elders, also called shepherds, and our 20 deacons, they've responded to this challenge. Our Bible teachers, those involved in various acts of service for the King of Kings, have as well. Everyone has and should, because it's not just those with a title or a specific position, but it's every sheep that wants every other sheep to be safe when the Lord comes again. Sometimes distinctions are made between 2 Greek words that are used for love, agape and philia. Agape, it's said, is the highest level of love, the unconditional love. 1 Corinthians 13, if I have not love, I'm nothing. Love is patient, kind, and it's the word agape. And sometimes in Greek, the word philia was used for a brotherly kind of love, a friendship sort of love. The city Philadelphia, from 2 Greek words, brotherly love. In the Greek text in John 21, Jesus asks Peter, "Do you agapao?" And Peter says, "I phileo." And sometimes people say, look at this. Peter doesn't have the level of love that Jesus is calling him to. But we have to remember a couple of things before we draw too strong of a distinction. One is that all of our English Bibles translate both words as love. The second is, and I can provide instances if you'd like to see it, that agape and philia are used interchangeably in the Gospel of John. Even God's love for us is called philia. And so it's not necessarily Peter limiting his response. The other thing we want to see is that they would have spoken Aramaic, and what we have is a Greek rendition of what was said. There are also different words used here for lambs and sheep that are not to be overly exaggerated. The other thing we want to note is that Peter didn't say no. When Jesus said, "Do you love me?" he didn't say, No, I don't love you like that. He said, "Yes," 3 times. Peter said, "Yes." And the 3rd time, when Jesus said, "Do you phileo? Do you have that love for me?" we must be careful that we don't make too much out of the difference in these 2 words. In fact, if you look at the text, it says Peter was grieved. It doesn't say Peter was grieved because Jesus changed the word from a higher form of love to a lower form. But Peter was grieved because it was the 3rd time he was asked. When was there a point in the life of Peter in which he had been asked 3 times whether he loved Jesus, whether he followed Jesus, whether he believed in Jesus? And all 3 times he said, "No, no, no." Now he has the opportunity, because of the grace of Jesus Christ, to say yes, yes, yes. And that is so precious to you and me, because there have been times in your life and mine when I could have said yes to someone, and I felt intimidated, I felt the pressure, I felt resistance, I was nervous about saying, "Yes, I love Jesus." And the fact that he gave Simon another opportunity means that he gives that to you and me as well. Shepherd my sheep. That's not just for our elder pastor shepherds. It's for every sheep that cares about other sheep. The discussion took place at a charcoal fire, and there's only one other scene in John in which this Greek word is used for this charcoal fire, or this phrase. And that was at the point of Peter's denials back in chapter 18. So here we are again at a fire. And this time it's not a servant girl saying, "You were with him, weren't you?" No. But it's Jesus saying, "Do you love me?" If you and I will answer that question, yes. We will lead, we will feed, we will nourish, we will protect, we will secure every sheep that we possibly can. There's another pair here. We've talked about seek and save, love and lead. Now, Jesus tells Simon, you know when you were a young man, you could dress yourself and go where you wanted? I'm paraphrasing. When you're old, your hands are going to be stretched out and you'll be taken where you don't want to go. And he was describing to Peter the death by which he would glorify God. This is verse 19. That's strong. That's blunt. That's direct. You've just said, Peter, I have a job for you. Love and lead and feed my sheep. Now, Peter, there's a time coming when you're going to die. And it's going to be not what you would want. Difficult, we might understand, painful, even violent. And many have understood this to mean, perhaps rightly so, that Peter would die by crucifixion. They will stretch out your hands. And there's a tradition, not named in the Bible, not confirmed, that Peter was crucified upside down out of reverence for his master. We don't know that. We do know what Jesus said here. The point Jesus made was the point all the way through the Gospel of John. It's about the glory of God. Simon, you're going to honor God by the way you'll die. You wouldn't choose it. You wouldn't want it. It won't be easy. It'll be costly to you, but it's going to show the greatness and the power of God. Because you're going to die by faith. You're going to die with courage. You're going to die with a place to go on the other side. And so then he turns to Peter and says, follow me. You and I might think, boy, Peter, if I were sitting there and Jesus had just put me back in the fold and now things are good between us, he's following, okay, Lord, I'm ready. But that's not what Simon does. He sees that beloved disciple. Lord, what about him? If I'm going to go through all of this, does he have to suffer as well? Will his experience and future be what you've described for me? Brothers and sisters, one barrier that keeps us from serving Jesus Christ with all of our heart and all of our soul and all of our strength is this question. What about him? What about that brother? What about that sister? And oh, we can look and we can find fault. We can compare. We can compete. And next thing you know, we've lost our drive to give our lives for Jesus Christ. Because we're asking, what about him? What about her? What about that? And so this last pair of instructions. Focus and follow. John clears up a rumor that had begun to spread by the time he wrote these words. And this may be another reason that the Spirit inspired John to include what we call chapter 21. Because when Jesus said to Simon, if I want the beloved disciple to remain until I return, what is that to you? You follow me. Don't get distracted. Don't get detoured. If I let him stay until I come again. And so, people began talking as they do. Jesus said John wouldn't die. And so John writes, Jesus did not say that disciple would not die. Only, he said, if I wanted to remain. What is that to you? You keep your focus. Speaking of focus, this powerful book closes with a reaffirmation of the conviction, the persuasion, the conclusion that an honest-hearted seeker is intended to reach after perusing these pages. This is the disciple who's testifying to these things and wrote these things, and we know that his testimony is true. You're building your life on reliable witness, on that which has been brought before you as evidence, as substantiation, as a foundation for following Jesus. And then the book closes. So much more could be written. Even the world itself would not contain the books if everything Jesus did were put in writing. And the fact is, there have been more books written about Jesus of Nazareth than any other person in history. Because of his impact, his influence, because of his life and his ministry and his signs and his teachings. Is there a response you need to make today? Have you reached the conviction that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God? And because of that, will you confess him before this company and put him on in baptism because he died and rose again? If you've reached that conviction, will you determine to seek and to save, to love and to lead, to focus and to follow? If you'd respond, why not now? Let's sing and stand.